To be able to fix a problem, you first have to figure out exactly what it is that goes wrong. And sometimes you can't do that by just looking in the console and asking about variables. Sometimes you really need to slow the code down and see where is what happening. For instance, here I have a problem that once I reach game over, I have -1 points. My idea is that I wanted to have 0 points. And why does it go to -1? And in those cases, I can use the debugger. And that takes up a lot of space. So I'm giving myself some more space here. This is the debugger. It's extremely powerful and a bit scary. So let's look at all we have. We have our code here, for instance. We can read through the code. If there's any errors in it, they will show up. There's nothing. But then let's look at the game over. And we can set a breakpoint here. We can just click any line number and this will mark it blue, and that's a breakpoint. We can also see them over here in the list of breakpoints. Here we can disable one. If we don't want to use it right now, we can remove it completely by right-clicking. And we can also click them here and remove them and disable them, even if we want to do that. That's a lot. So a breakpoint means that the program will stop once it reaches here. So when I'm also just going to open a console, draw down here, and if I reload, and the cool thing about breakpoints is that they're kept during reload. So when you reload the page, and you see, you lose a point, and now it has stopped. You see this play button here is blue, so that means it has stopped. Usually there will also be a stop button up here, but apparently we can't see it right now. So now we can step through the code one line at a time. That's these 3, actually all 5 of these buttons here. This one steps over a line. This one steps into a function if we want to. And this one steps to the end of the function we are. And this one just continues playing. So let's take one step. Console log. And we can see it just wrote game over to the console. And then we can step over here and here. And the cool thing is, then the debugger tells us what is our variable right now. What does each line set this variable to? And we can also ask in the console about the variables, just like usual. But whereas usually we can only ask about variables that are global, now we can ask about variables that are in this block where we're currently stopped. And if that isn't enough for us, we can also see them here. These are all the variables in our scope, the scope that we are currently in. We can even see beyond that. So let's step more through this. Square, square. Yes, we add up a lot of pause here. So this didn't really solve anything for us. If we ask about points, it still says we have -1. So the problem wasn't in the game over, but what came before. And we can actually also see that if we look over here at the call stack. The call stack shows us which function called this one. And right now we are in game over. We have stepped through line 40, but we came from miss square, line 112, that called game over. So maybe the problem is here instead. So I subtract points, and if it's less than 0, I game over. I'm not sure. Let's see what happens. I'm making another breakpoint there, and then I'm just going to push play and also reload. And now we're here. We can even hover over points and see that we have 2 points. We can also write the number of points and see that there's 2. If I step over this line, I can see I can hover over points and it says it's 1. I could also write it down here. I could also use the eye, and I could also click here on the watch and add and I want to watch points. So points is 1. Is it less than 0? And I can step over here. And no, it isn't. So it skipped game over. And then it skips this. So I can just press play again. Okay. And then the next time it comes into here, miss square. Now point is 1. And I step over. And points are 0. Is that less than 0? Well, I'm not sure. But I could actually, in my watch, I could also keep an eye on what's inside of if statements. And just add one of those. Like this, say points less than 0. And then here it says false. So that, of course, means that if something is false, then it shouldn't go into the game over. But if so, does it? No, it doesn't. And I'll press play again. Points is, next time we enter this miss square, points is now 0, and points less than 0 is false. And then I step 1, and now I can see that points is -1, and now this became true. So it only became true when points was less than 0, and I can see now that's not exact. That's not quite what I wanted. I actually wanted to say if points is less than or equal to 0, and I can even change the code in here, and then I can try and run it. But of course there is this thing, it sometimes opens something differently. I think that's brackets that does this. The problem is if I reload, the changes in the code are not kept. So we have to go back to brackets and change that. But let's just do it. If it's less than or equal to 0. And points is, what is points? It's 1, so we shouldn't have game over. And now it's 0. And now we can see, now we are at game over, and we can step into the game over function and console log that. And play and see what are our final points. That's 0. So we fixed the problem. Just remember to turn off the breakpoints so we don't waste our time with them. So this is a very powerful tool, and it can do a lot more. But just as long as you remember, put a breakpoint where you think the error might be, or where you want to keep track of things, and then step over them one at a time. Watch out for especially things that are inside if statements. Ask if, just watch out for them, and you'll be told if they are false or true. And then step through your code one step slowly at a time, and you will see what happens. And it might help you to actually see the problem happening and then find out how to fix it. There are many more features in this debugger, but I think that this is enough to help us find our bugs and de them, as they say.